Wonderful. All right, so we are being recorded now. Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Bohrt. I am the Chief Accreditation Officer at the Network of Schools of Public Policy, Affairs, and Administration, also known as NASPAA. It is a pleasure to join this introductory conversation about careers in public and international service with you today. And I am joined by three of my colleagues. We have Leah Miller, a Foreign Service Officer at the U.S. Department of State. We also have Sarah Novack, Strategic Partnership Officer at the Center for Victims of Torture. And we also have Matthew Warshaw, Chief Operating Officer at D3 Systems. And just a quick reminder that actually bios for each person on this panel can be found in your programs. Now, just real quick to talk about format, we have structured this session as a conversation. So I will be asking the panelists some questions, and then they'll provide their insights into their career paths and how they've gotten where they are. I strongly encourage you to type your questions in the chat box so that we can share them with the panelists. That will be the method for asking your questions, anything that you may have for our panelists. And I also invite you to turn on your camera and mute your mic. Like I said, this is going to be just a conversation today, so we're hoping everyone can get the most out of it. And I think we're ready to get started with questions. And to start off, for our panelists, for all three, I would like to ask you, what does public service mean to you? Yes, so maybe Sarah, you're closest to me. Would you like to go first?
Sure, I can start. So to me, public service is working in a field that I'm passionate about and that like advances the global good. And there's like I would say overall my colleagues would say that they're passionate about what they do and what they offer to the world.
Wonderful. Leah, what about you?
Thank you for that great question, but also I just want to quickly thank APSIA for this great opportunity. I always love doing anything with APSIA. It's such a great network, and you all are very fortunate to be a part of this amazing program. But what public service means to me is it isn't just necessarily going to work for the government or going to work in a nonprofit or something like that. It's just literally for me about making wherever I am or whatever I'm doing a little bit better after I've left than when I found it. So if that is fostering relationships with people, putting something into place that wasn't existing there before, teaching somebody a set of skills that they didn't have before that helps them advance in their lives or overcome some problem that without my intervention or something that I've done, they couldn't have overcome, that's really all it means to me. So it can have impacts at the micro and macro level. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I already see some people introducing themselves in the chat. Yeah, definitely tell us who you are, where you are. We would love to hear. And Matthew, I think you're still here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what public service means to you?
For me, am I coming through?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Starting to have some connection issues. So I'm in the private sector, and I think often there's an assumption that we're not working towards the public good or we're not working towards common goals. But a lot of the projects we do serve public sector clients, nonprofits. We do a lot with the U.S. government, but we also do a lot with the United Nations, with the World Bank, and we do things with Sesame Workshop. And so as a business, I think it's important to, we have a mantra, we want to do well as a company, but we also want to do good. And a lot of the work that we do is about supplying research and data that help people make better decisions. And sometimes they're hard decisions to make. If you're looking
I think we have lost Matt at this point. But I really appreciate, as probably our audience can tell, the panel is made up of somebody working in government, somebody working for a nonprofit, and somebody working in the private sector, right? And I think that is such an important view of what public service means and what we want to introduce you to. So if each of our panelists can also talk a little bit more about what their current careers also entail to kind of give our advisors a little bit of an idea of what the actual job is. So maybe Leah, maybe we start with you this time and then we go to Sarah.
Happy to start. So my career currently entails a lot of interagency engagement because, as you know in my bio and from the nice introduction, I'm your public servant in the group on the panel. I'm the one who works for the government. I'm a career diplomat, foreign service officer with the U.S. Department of State, but I'm currently detailed to the U.S. Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, where I'm working on issues that intersect between Department of State and Department of Defense interests, specifically on women, peace, and security. But saying all that to say that when I was in college and in grad school, I wanted to be a social worker. My master's degree was in social work, which is a very atypical degree for someone who ends up in the diplomatic field. And what ended up leading me into the path of diplomacy was the need to find ways to finance my grad school education. Because I come from a humble family, we're not rich, we're not poor. I'm the oldest. So I had already gone to undergrad and quickly realized that I needed an additional degree to my master's degree in social work because I didn't really have the stomach to do the frontline, in the trenches social work. I just wanted to basically take all the at-risk youth that I was working with home because I knew for the 1 hour that they spent with me was the only time I could guarantee their safety. But that's not realistic. So I was like, okay, I need to go back to school, but how am I going to finance this without going into crippling debt? And that's where my college advisors, mentors, and friends like you pointed me in the direction of different fellowships that were available. And one such fellowship was the Thomas R. Pickering Graduate Fellowship that is offered and funded by the Department of State, which once you apply, basically funds another master's degree education and guarantees your entrance into the Department of State, assuming you also pass the prerequisites for the Department of State. So it's not a guarantee, but it's just a greater likelihood that you'll get admitted. So I do have to put that caveat. But saying all that to say that I came in thinking, all right, I'm going to get a free degree out of this. I'm going to get to go to a top tier school that is part of the APSIA network. I'm going to get to get this great professional experience, learn languages, live overseas, and then I can kind of write my own ticket. But here, nearly 20 years later, I'm still very much working for the U.S. Department of State, mostly because I feel like the social worker heart that still beats within me is being fulfilled in the work that I get to do. It's just the audience that I'm serving is a little bit different. It's broader than just my local community. It's broader than just my state or the city in which I live. It's become international, and it's sort of my ability to represent those demographics and those populations in the United States and interacting with their counterparts in meaningful ways overseas. So that's sort of the story. I can get into detail later about the kind of the work, but that's the path. And it's because of advisors like you all that really helped shape the course of my life and put this opportunity in front of me. And it is social work, it's just on a different scale. So social workers role over.
I love that. I love that. Sarah, what about you?
Thanks, Carmen. So as Carmen mentioned kind of at the beginning, I work at a nonprofit or INGO. We do work internationally and locally here in Minnesota where I'm based. And I work with programs across our organization to develop grants, partnerships, and share out their impact with donors. A number of our donors are state and federal agencies. And that includes drafting proposals, budgets, evaluation plans, and also managing large teams, and in some cases partners. But I would say I got into this work kind of in a roundabout way, similar to what was previously mentioned. And my undergraduate degree is in statistics, and I really, throughout my undergraduate career, was convinced I was going to be an actuary until I started studying for all of those actuarial exams and realized that I am much more of a people person, and I didn't want to study for the rest of my academic or professional career. And so I joined the Peace Corps because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that is kind of how I got first introduced into the international sector. And from there, went to graduate school and got more connected into the international space here in Minnesota and DC. And I've been with the Center for Victims of Torture since graduate school. So, and kind of similar, I was looking for a way to finance my graduate degree and looking for like part-time work that was, I was just coming off of Peace Corps and kind of looking for opportunities that I was passionate about, but also would advance my career. And the CVT was a perfect fit, and I just have stayed ever since. And that's a little bit more about what I do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And now, Matthew, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your path to public service? And international work. Can you hear us, Matt?
Sorry, are you back to me? I apologize. I had to switch devices to get a connection. I don't know when I dropped out last time.
No, thank you. We got a chance to hear about the organization that you're currently involved with, and now we're trying to understand kind of your path to where you are now in international service. So if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I specifically went to American University because it had a school of international service. Service was the key word in the name of the school. And it's one of the reasons I picked it. And I thought for sure that I would go right into the State Department and I was going to be a foreign service officer and I would be the next George Kennan without a doubt. And then, of course, while I was in school, the Soviet Union fell apart. And so suddenly there wasn't a need for as many diplomats. And for the first 2 years after I graduated, there was no foreign service exam because they were shrinking the size of the government. And so I had these amazing plans to go immediately into government service, and yet I couldn't do that. And I ended up going a different pathway into business. But in a lot of ways, I've gotten to do so many more things that are related to service by being in business. I've been personally to over 70 countries at this point. I worked for a company where we did projects in 120 countries last year. And we have this lovely impact by employing people to do the work we do. We collect this data. And so I would say even with your best laid plans, if your desire is to be involved in something, you'll find a way to get there. I knew I wanted to do something international. I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't just build a good and sell a product. And now I'm involved in a business where we collect this data that really helps practitioners in the foreign policy space make decisions. So if you don't get to the first place on your first try, don't be discouraged. And you might find another pathway that ends up taking you to even greater heights than you might have imagined.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think after hearing your responses, I'm kind of seeing a little bit of a trend, right? And so for our advisors, I think that if your students are using the words that our panelists are using, that, you know, service, wanted to make a difference, passion, mission, right? Like all of these things, in my experience, are at the core of students that would succeed in a career in public and international service, right? And so I was really glad to hear that thread throughout the responses. And so, yeah, that's one indicator of someone that may want to pursue, or you may encourage to pursue a career in the field. But I wonder if our panelists can share with us, what are the skills that young professionals need to be successful at organizations like yours? So that's kind of the first part. What are the skills that young professionals need to be successful? But then the second part to that would be, how can advisors support development in these areas with limited resources? So whoever wants to take that, I'll let you kind of think about that a little bit. But yes, skills and how to support the development of those skills with limited resources.
I can speak to the
Go ahead,
first
Leah.
part unless Matthew or
Uh-huh.
Sarah want to jump in. Okay, for me, I think if you want to come into the Department of State, I feel like you shouldn't feel limited by the major that you take. That's why I sort of shared my personal story, because traditionally, and as Matthew was saying, and Sarah too, traditionally it's been people who've studied economics or foreign policy, political science, those types of majors, but people still continue to study those majors, but it's not exclusively people who are in those majors that come into the State Department. And in fact, the State Department is actively seeking people from different backgrounds. The value of our diplomatic corps is in the varied experiences that we have and the training and the pathways that we take to get into the Foreign Service. So like I said, my path took me through social work, which is still relatively unique amongst my peers. Most of them are lawyers or Peace Corps volunteers. Which is still a trend that's been since the start. But I would just say that if, going back to what Martha was saying about, if you hear your students coming to you asking about opportunities to give back, service, public service, serving the greater good, making a difference, then the State Department is a good place for them to consider going to. In terms of the skills that I think that the State Department needs, despite the era of AI and Chat GPT and all those types of things, you still need to be a strong writer because we don't use those things in our writing. I think increasingly we're looking for ways to integrate more and to leverage the benefits of AI. But I think the bread and butter work of a diplomat is really our oral and written communications. How are we able to convey our messages? How are we able to understand what people are saying to us? The key for any successful diplomat, regardless of whatever path you take within the State Department, is strong communication skills. So any student, regardless of their major, things that you can advise them to do is to go ahead and really dig deep in those 101 level writing courses, maybe even take a higher level writing course, take a course that challenges their ability to look at case studies of diplomatic, points in history, conclusions of war, times when, it was a diplomatic initiative that thwarted the need for war. Just having some awareness of these things really shouldn't preclude their ability to study whatever they want, but I think having a general awareness of those things is helpful. And I would say one other important skill set too is just interpersonal skills. So, the State Department, like every workplace, is made up of both extroverts and introverts and everybody on the spectrum between those two end poles. But to be successful in diplomacy, even if you're a very introverted person, you're going to have to get comfortable with being around people, interacting with people, listening to people, working with people, solving, maybe differences of understanding, miscommunications. So for people who do have the spirit of service, but are maybe more reluctant to kind of interact, if there are opportunities for them to engage in and take courses that kind of push the development of those interpersonal skills, even for the most introverted among us, some of my most introverted colleagues are some of the most successful because they know how to do targeted interaction. So I think if, you can encourage the students to look into, developing interpersonal skills, developing a comfortability with some level of public speaking, even if it's not like in front of a huge, TED Talks audience size, it could just be a round table, but just feeling comfortable and confident in communicating in that way. Those are some of the key skills that, regardless of their academic background or path between, graduation and entering in the workforce, they can develop. They'll really be solid and strong candidates for the State Department. Over.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, and I think, what you're mentioning also, thinking about the limited resources piece, these are skills that students can develop in class, but also, at Toastmasters and other avenues where, the resources that already exist, and then students can go to them without necessarily having to, pay for like a study abroad trip or that sort of thing. So that's wonderful to hear. All right, Sarah, Matt, your insights into this? Soft skills, that's right. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
There are so many things you can do that are low cost for sure, or no cost. And I would agree 100% about communication skills. We're hiring now. I've seen a few dozen candidates, and the people that impress me the most are generally not the ones that have a million things on their CV about all the different things that they did. It's the ones who can actually communicate and tell me a story. Be able to articulate to me something about your experience in school, And it's a simple sounding task, but being a good storyteller is really hard. And there are a lot of free tools out there to help pick up some of those skills. The other thing I would say is that regardless of what you study, there is a need for understanding how to use data in every single field. State Department uses lots and lots of data. And so your ability to do that, if you add that into what you're doing in your studies, or you're willing to take it on and learn a little bit how to do that yourself, can be huge. And you don't even have to pay for software or anything else. It's free now. You can use R if you can get access to R, and they use it in all kinds of classes now as a replacement for SPSS and Stata. Use it in a paper. Find a way to use some data and use it, and then be able to tell a story about what you did with that data, why you picked it, how you used it in the paper. I'm telling you, there are so many places that would find it helpful to have you on their team if you're the kind of person that can be comfortable with that. So we need to be humans. There's a lot of AI out there, but knowing how to use data, we see it everywhere we go now. And I would say that's something that students can pick up, and it's usually part of the course load. Most of them have to take research methods at some point, or they've got to take an economics class, or they've got to take something. They're likely to run across some data. If they learn how to tell a story about that effectively, it's a wonderful, first step through the door.
That's right. And so many resources online. I know that when I was going through my data courses, definitely it was great to have a good instructor, but you're always, as a student, you're always finding those resources anyway, right? Khan Academy, other places that provide those. So you're right. There's tons of opportunity to go the extra mile there at no additional cost. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and if I age myself just a little bit, when I first did data in my undergraduate program, we had to go to the mainframe and put it in and then walk across campus to get the printout. So it's a lot easier now. Trust me, it's a lot easier.
That's right. That's right. Sarah, do you have any additional insights on this topic?
Yeah, I started writing down all the skills that I thought were important, and Leah and Matt covered them beautifully. Writing, storytelling, having a very clear communication strategy. In my work, I'm often liaising with donors, and so that's just a really important part, right? Being able to share the story of your organization, the story of like who you're serving, why it matters. And also, kind of as Matt was mentioning, using data to tell that story as well is really important. How many people did you see? How did they improve? Is there a specific like percent or number how you're evaluating how people interact with your services is also an important piece. So data for sure. The only outside skill that I had kind of written down earlier was synthesizing information. And so what I mean by this is in my work, I write grant proposals that respond to a notice of funding opportunity from the government. And those government opportunities can often be upwards of 100 pages. And so being able to read through a 100-page document and kind of synthesize what is the main message, what are the instructions, what do you need to do, is really important. I don't know the best way to develop that skill. I would say that with me, it just came with practice and came over time. I don't think that it's a course that you can necessarily take and then all of a sudden you have this skill. It's really one that just needs to be developed over time. But I think if you can summarize information from kind of a lot or a kind of a big data source, that will get you far too.
No, thank you. That's true. So important. And there's not one course, right? So that is absolutely true. Okay. So I was actually able to remind participants that we have about 20 more minutes to discuss with our panelists. And I was going to encourage you to start putting in your questions. I'm still encouraging you to do that, but I do see that something came in. And we have here a comment that says, I would love to hear more about who were our panelists' mentors right? And how they sought out guidance when learning about these paths. That's a really good topic. So yeah, who were your mentors and how did you seek guidance when you were learning about your career path? Who wants to share first?
I guess I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm thinking back, way back in the day when I was still an undergrad. I guess it wasn't that long ago, but it was long enough. My immediate mentors were probably like the dean of the School of Social Work where I attended. I went to Syracuse. Also, there were some professors who I reached out to who had had some experience with either they had been a consultant or they had done some sort of contract appointment with either like USAID or they had been a Peace Corps volunteer and had some experience working even remotely with an embassy. And so they kind of were able to show me the synergies and linkages between social work and sort of these broader fields that may not logically come to mind when I think about what I can do with a social work degree. But some of them were also my peers, only a couple years ahead of me who had gone through similar questions, figuring out their life, what they're going to do, and just talking to them. And of course, they were guidance counselors too. Even though it's crazy, I was already in college, I still would occasionally reach out to my high school guidance counselor because she had been such an important part of my life during that time in my life, that the relationship that we fostered was more than just for, the 3 or 4 years I was in high school. And I felt like I could always bounce ideas off of her because she really knew me as a person. And so she was able to talk to me on a deeper level than just sort of, here's the information you need, these are the links you need to follow, these are the tests you need to take. She was able to say, well, Leah, these are your strengths. And I remember when you struggled with this and how you overcame that. So you shouldn't be afraid of this hurdle. So, she just instilled in me, just more self-confidence, at a time when I think a lot of young people are insecure. They don't feel they stack up. They don't feel they can compete. They don't feel like their major is good enough or the school they didn't go to is well ranked enough or whatever. I needed someone who could kind of help me just set that all aside and remember who I am and what I'm capable of. And that's what I needed to show. And I think that's a power that all of you have. So that's my story. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. We're here talking about making a difference, and I agree. Advisors are in a career of making a difference as well, very impactful. Yeah, Sarah, Matt, any additional insights? Sarah, you want to go next? Talk about your mentors. Thank you.
Yeah. So both in my undergraduate degree program and in my graduate program, the Career Centers had mentorship programs where they would recruit alumni to be mentors of current students. And I took advantage of those every year that I possibly could. I wanted to try and get as much information as possible about what skills I needed to learn, how to develop them, and also just the different career opportunities that were available to me, especially as I was transitioning away from wanting to be an actuary into the unknown. So I took advantage of those programs, and I think that they each really taught me a lot. But I would say that the biggest, most impactful mentor I've had has been my supervisor at CVT. And I would say that the biggest benefit he has is just listening, and then knows what my skills are and how I can leverage them to advance our goals and advance my career. And I think that's what everyone wants from a mentor, right? And I think Leah mentioned this, but being able to recognize what your skills are and then how to use them to kind of further advance.
Thank you. Yeah, so important. Matt, do you have any additional insights on mentorship?
Getting better at the unmute button day by day. There are so many possible mentors. I would say anyone who's willing to give you time and talk to you, you never know what you might learn. And I would encourage your students to be open to hearing from as broad a variety of people as possible. Everything said about mentors, absolutely. I had similar experiences, mentors who looked at, this is a skill you really have, you should polish this. I know you want to do this, you're not very good at it. So if you want to do better, you're going to have to learn it or focus on something else. It's great to have that someone who will be honest with you. But I would say more importantly, long term, and I talk to a lot of my employees about this, relationship building is very, very important. And you just don't know where those relationships are going to go. And you need to treat everyone with respect. And you need to nurture each one of those relationships. And you need to spend time, even if it has no gain for you, reaching out to people, seeing how they are, staying in touch with them, being aware of what's going on in their world. And you never know where those relationships are going to take you. I'm at a conference right now where we were both together on the ground in Kosovo and just knew each other casually. We're now going to go do a multi-million-dollar contract together. And we haven't spoken in, what is that, 23 years now. So but you nurture those things over time. And I think social media, it can really help you stay in touch with people, but it can also give you the impression that you don't have to reach out. You'll just see what's there. My staff tell me, well, I'll just find somebody on LinkedIn. Well, maybe, but you better to have a relationship to begin with, and that really makes a difference. And if you're in school, no better place to make them. Professors, professionals who come to campus, all of your fellow students, you don't know where they're going to be in 20 years, but they may be really, really helpful to you as mentors in the future.
That's right. That's right. And mentoring relationships are such a two-way street too, that sometimes students may feel that, you know, oh, I don't have anything to contribute. Like, I don't even know what to ask. But there's such a two-way street as well. And so definitely encouraging them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite thing that I've ever received in my life is one of my employees, when she moved on to Cornell to go work on her PhD, she gave me a little plaque about being a mentor and how much she appreciated me. It's one of my favorite things. I have it sitting on my desk. So yeah, I get more out of it than they do most of the time.
Yeah, very rewarding. All right, so we do have more questions in the chat. I don't want to go to the question without acknowledging the English advisor who was encouraged by the conversation. I am also encouraged by an English advisor as somebody who hires people right out of you know, their undergrad high. Oh, Inda, okay, wonderful. Yes, we're also encouraged. And then also somebody mentioned the idea of starting to call soft skills power skills, because they are more valuable and versatile than soft implies. And I really like that. That's, yeah, I'm also going to be borrowing it like some of your colleagues. And of course, bring in speakers that can talk to your students. Sounds like a great idea. And Carmen shared some resources in the chat for you all as well. Okay, so here's another comment. I'm often asked by undergraduate students what career paths they could pursue with their various majors. Connecting their academic study with potential entry-level jobs is hard. Any advice on how to connect students to entry-level opportunities in public service, especially interested in maths entry to the private sector in public service? And how, so any advice on that, connecting them to level entry opportunities in public service and to reassure students about the nonlinear path to public service? Yeah, I think Matt is struggling with the mute button, but I think he wants to tell us something. So I'm gonna let him go first.
I would say just a quick item on that, the nonlinear path. Students need to really understand that it's not about there are certain steps and you take all of these steps and you get to the right spot. Pick a path, start going down that path. If it's not the right one, pick another one and go down that path. It's going to happen to you at some point, and you just have to be open to the experience and trying those different things out. And in terms of nonlinear, a friend of mine who's early in her State Department career now, she spent more than a decade working outside. She worked at a school, she worked at an international camp, she did a whole bunch of different things in her life. And after about 10 or 15 years, then she took the Foreign Service exam. And now she's a Foreign Service officer. And there are a lot of different ways to get to where you want to go. The other thing I would just say is If you're interested on how to connect your skills to entry-level jobs, read the job descriptions, see what they're asking for, look at what the skills that they want are, and figure out how to explain how you have that skill or how something you did in a class relates to that skill. It works on me all the time. We hire lots of people with absolutely no work experience, sometimes no internship experience. It's more about, can you tell me that you actually read the job description, that you know what we do as a company because you went to our website, and can you relate the things you studied to what we're doing? And that's really key. That will help you stand out. You would be stunned how many cover letters I receive that don't seem to mention what we do as a company and why that person is interested in what we do. So small things make a big difference.
Yeah, and it's even part of that storytelling that we were talking about earlier in terms of the skills. Telling your story in a cover letter is something that would catch my attention as someone who's screening resumes and cover letters as well. So yeah, have the students learn how to tell their story and connect it to the entry-level job. That's great advice. Thank you, Matt. Sarah, anything you wanna mention about this two-part question?
Yeah, sorry. I was also struggling with mute for a second. I was gonna just kind of build off what Matt was saying too about the nonlinear opportunity or nonlinear path. And I would just add to be open to different opportunities, right? Like you might be going down a pathway and an opportunity presents itself to have an internship or a fellowship, and go ahead and take it, right? Like you might like the path you're on, but the opportunities, if they sound interesting to you and rewarding, I would encourage people to not be afraid to take a risk in that area. And then just connecting their academic study with entry-level jobs. I would say everyone at my organization has a different degree. So, but the main skill you need to thrive is writing. And so what you can convey, right, no matter what degree program you have, is that you have those writing skills that we talked about earlier. And I think, as Matt said, telling that through your cover letter, or we always ask for a writing sample in all of our job applications as well, or at least in my department. And so, picking something that you wrote that you're passionate about, that your advisor has maybe reviewed and looked at, could be really helpful as well.
Wonderful. Leah, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I'll just answer briefly so we can save space for other questions, because I think it's been amply covered by my other amazing panelists. But I would say with respect to the State Department, I put in a link to various internships that are offered. So I think in terms of undergraduate students who are looking for opportunities to just get a little taste of the work, to see, where there may be synergies between what they're studying and what the work might entail, to really look into the internship programs, which I want to happily announce that only within the last couple of years now, they've, Congress has passed through advocacy from the State Department and our employees union to make these internships paid, because I think that enables a lot more students to be able to take advantage of these opportunities than they did historically when they were unpaid, which meant, mom and pop or whoever, some family member or friend who had to subsidize your cost of living in one of the most expensive cities in the country. Whereas now they offer this paid opportunity. And I think that those are great opportunities to consider. I saw a question about the timing for the summer opportunities. If it's not yet on the site, I'm sure that it should, because by now they're usually in the thick of starting to review those applications. So I would say just go ahead and sign up for the updates, and you'll likely be able to get more information from the folks who run that program directly. And then just with quick respect to the nonlinear path, at least with the State Department in mind, I can't speak for other agencies. As I said earlier on, I really think that the nonlinear path is the common path these days. It's historically what I told you, you had to be an economics major or a political science major, but now really it's just more about making the case, kind of what Matthew and Sarah were already alluding to, where the skill sets that you've developed over time somehow has some sort of synergy or some sort of connection to the work that's happening within the State Department. And the good news is the State Department's got its hands in almost everything. So, it isn't just straight up bilateral foreign policy, international relations, treaty negotiation. Yes, of course, we still do those things, but we're doing so much more. We're looking at climate change. We're tackling diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We're talking about serving historically marginalized groups. We're doing cultural programs. We're doing business investment, looking at creating safe environments for foreign direct investment. So, I mean, what we're doing really runs the gamut of a lot of stuff that really encompasses a lot of majors. So I don't want students to feel intimidated if they feel like what they've pursued thus far doesn't necessarily immediately align in their mind to the work of what they think the State Department does. You'd really be surprised. So I would say don't count yourself out. Just throw your hat in the ring. Over.
Yeah, if I could quickly add in, sometimes going into public service after several years of work experience and maybe also a master's degree, you will start at a higher grade level as well. If you're going into civil service or foreign service, that can make a difference over a long career. So sometimes skipping over that point of coming in a little low as an undergraduate or I have a master's degree, but not a lot of work experience, but then getting out there for a couple of years and then coming into the government, that can be good. It can also be a very long process to get into the government. State Department, Treasury Department, Department of Defense, you may need to get a clearance. So it's good to be working while you're in that process, because it may take a year or more to get you through the door on the clearance side. And for non-government, exactly, I mean, what about the Society for International Development? I mean, they're representing hundreds of companies that get money from USAID, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in the UK. Lots of opportunities for internships with those companies through SID. I can't type very well, so I'll ask Carmen to put sidw.org in the chat. Lots of places to find opportunities.
Wonderful. I'm going to add something real quick that I know when I was an undergrad really helped me with this idea of nonlinear paths. I did my undergrad in business. And I think this idea of having the resource that is LinkedIn and looking at someone who you aspire to be in like 20 years and then see their path. And a lot of people change careers throughout their professional life. And so I think that even that could be a useful exercise. It was for me, it may be useful for some of your students to, who's someone you admire and did they have a linear path where they started entry level and then they got to the top, right? So that may be useful. We did have a question from Barbara. I believe it's been answered, Barbara, if it hasn't, let me know, but she asked, how important is study abroad and internships from an employer point of view? And so we discussed that really from an employer point of view, telling your story and what you've done, whether it's in country or out, is the most important part, relating it to that. And then we talked about the importance of internships to get your foot in the door, right? And so Barbara, again, if you have something additional, do let us know. And continue looking at the chat because all of the resources that are being shared are on there. So we have a question here that asks our panelists, what are the challenges you have faced in your public service careers and how have you overcome them? And I think if I can have one panelist talk just about, challenges that students should be ready for, and then we have one final question before we wrap it up. We have about an additional 5 minutes here.
I was going to punt to Leah with State Department, but maybe the challenge of having to go from State Department to National Defense University and speak in acronyms and say over after speaking. But boy, I'll tell you, I think the more important lesson is you're going to fail at something at some point, and it's just important to know that you'll survive it. And that there's an opportunity to reinvent and try again. And some things will be completely out of your power. Yeah, I ran a large company as a subsidiary in Afghanistan from 2005 to the summer of 2021, and it ended in a blink. And the Taliban took over the country, and I spend a lot of my time writing letters for employees to try to get them visas to come here. how do you come back from that level of failure? Well, you just keep chipping away at it. When I started in 2021, I got 0 visas in 2021 for people to get out. I'm up to 8. Still not great given the number of employees that we had there, but 8 is better than 0. And you just keep chipping away at it bit by bit. But I think for the students, it's just important to know that something will happen and you've got to be resilient, and you've got to try coming back at it another way or trying something different. But don't let it just say, well, that's it for me. I failed once, I'm done. Can't be that way. You've got to go forward.
Yep, that's true. Wonderful, wonderful advice and things to keep in mind. Sarah, Leah, anything you want to add before we go to our final question? Okay.
I would just add one thing really quickly. Agree to everything Matthew said, especially the gobbledygook and acronym soup and overing. I've learned that from being here, but at least you know when I'm done. But I would say for me, the biggest challenge that I face in my public service career is just being able to objectively serve different administrations. So I won't go into too much detail about that because that could be a whole other panel discussion, which we could share, but just struggling when my own personal values and beliefs don't align very well with the values and principles of a given administration. But that's the essence of public service, is the ability to continue to do what you believe and be true to yourself and your own values, and find ways to continue to do that work, even when you're faced with an administration or a set of beliefs that you are directly in opposition to. That has been my singular greatest struggle in my career. And I think it will continue to be one of the hardest things that I face in these very contentious election times. But it goes back to what Matthew was saying about just having resilience and keeping your eye on the ball, because at the end of the day, as a public servant, you're really not serving an administration or a specific president. You're serving the American people and the Constitution. So the only thing that really helped me get through the really harder times, and there have been many, which I don't have to tell this group, that's what I've had to hold on to. Just hold on to the fact that the true people that I'm serving it's the American people and the values and priorities that are set out in the Constitution, and not A or B administration. So I'll just add that, and I won't say over.
No, it's so true. Yes, you're getting claps here. So yes, no, very important. Thank you, Leah. So we have one final question. We have a couple of minutes, so whoever on the panel wants to respond to this. But the question is, how important is it for a student to go to graduate school before starting this type of career versus trying to get a job without a higher degree, but getting it while working? Is that even an option for careers in public service?
Should be. I think first, when it comes to the graduate degree, it should really be more about what the student wants. If they're very interested in something, pursue that degree and get it. If they have a special opportunity to get a 3+2 or a 4+1 degree, so they're getting bachelor's and master's together, that can be a wonderful way to do it and be done and have it. But there's a lot to be said for knowing yourself a little better, having had a little experience, and then going to grad school to get, I would say, a better focus on your degree. At my company, D3, we help employees if they want to work full-time and get a master's part-time. We help with making flexible schedules. We have tuition assistance for them. A lot of places within the government have flexible scheduling, tuition assistance, lots of grad programs. The courses are taught between 5:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. There's a lot of ways to make it happen. I would say it's really more important that the student knows why they're getting the master's degree. And if their hope is that, well, if I get it, it's an automatic higher pay when I start a job, not necessarily. I hire undergrads and people coming out with a master's degree but no experience at the same level. And sometimes the master's degree people go faster and they get promoted faster, but sometimes they don't. And so it really depends what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's exactly what came to mind for me, was the tuition assistance. That can be one of the biggest advantages for sure. All right, so sadly we run out of time, but these are wonderful questions. Thank you everybody for participating. I do wanna thank Sarah, Leah, and Matthew for their invaluable insights, and to each person that attended, each of you, this panel. Before you go, I do wanna ask you to please complete a brief evaluation that is actually gonna be shared with you here on Zoom. So if you could please just help us out with this feedback. And while you're doing that, I also want to make sure that to reiterate what Carmen said earlier, that this week is full of activities. So you do have a session tomorrow on comparing graduate degrees and mapping financial aid. So some very important stuff as well. Let's see. And I think Carmen, Brittany, are we giving it a couple of minutes, or how do we want to manage that? Okay. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for answering, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice to meet everyone.
You as well.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Carmen and Brittany, Martha. That was great. It was nice being on the panel with you, Matthew and Sarah. Hope to maybe get the band back together at a future date if you need us.
We're in, Leo, we're in. Over.
Awesome. And I promise not to say over.
It made me feel like I was
I
at
loved
home.
it.
I know, well, especially once I get out of this environment, I probably will go back to never saying over, but I just, I'm a creature of adaptation, as are most diplomats. So I'm saying